Hey everyone! Welcome to the Emotive Mind podcast, where I, your host, Autumn, talk all things mental health, relationships, manifesting and spirituality, self-love, and owning a small business, Kello Collective. On this podcast, I will offer advice and motivation to you on navigating the ups and downs of life, anxiety, personal growth, and finding your true self through sharing my own journey with you. If you're anything like me and have experienced intense anxiety and mental health issues, or maybe feel stuck at where you're at in life, then I'm so glad that you found me here on the Emotive Mind podcast, where together we can transform our lives and create a motive mind. Make sure to connect with me by liking, following, subscribing, and sharing the Emotive Mind podcast on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify at Emotive Mind Podcast. There, you can find the video recordings of each episode, the posting schedule, which new episodes come out every Tuesday, or share your thoughts and comments on your personal journey, the podcast, or whatever you would like to hear me talk about next. I would also be extremely grateful for you to check out and support this podcast through my small business, Kello Collective, hand-poured coconut soy candles and products, which you can find on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok at Kello Collective, and shop on kellocollective.com. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for your continued love and support on this podcast and my business. Be sure to check out any previous episodes that you may have missed, but I hope you enjoyed this episode. On the last episode, we talked about my experience with getting into a situationship that matched the energy and mental state of my mind at the time and how I wanted to save that person. I also shared some advice to you if you are experiencing the situation currently or have experienced the situation. On this episode, I will be having a heart-to-heart with you as I share more about my experience with watching my brother crumble right before my eyes from a drug addiction. I do want to mention before we begin that this is a trigger warning for those of you who have a hard time listening to or talking about the loss of a loved one, especially to a drug addiction. If this is hard for you, you may want to skip and go watch the previous 2 episodes that are already posted. So we're going to rewind back to 2014. This was 4 years before my anxiety began and 2 years before my brother passed away. Up until this point, I had been very sheltered by my parents and my brother from his depression and drug addiction. Now, I do see that it was necessary to a degree because I didn't need to be involved in the dark reality at such a young age. But it's crazy to think about how you can have zero clue as to what's happening under your own roof. I was slowly exposed to more of what my brother was doing, like smoking, partying, drinking. There was a constant cycle of new friends and girlfriends that he would introduce me and my family to, and he was in and out of jobs and didn't have a clear direction of where he wanted to go in life. From the outside looking in, he just seemed like he was going through a partying phase in his life. And even then, he always kept a big, bright smile and nice outfits, gold jewelry. He was always put together, and you really could not tell the destruction that he was living behind closed doors. He was also pursuing his passion of music and rapping under his stage name Motive, which is actually where I got the inspiration from to name this podcast. And I do have a video on Instagram and Facebook explaining more about this, so make sure to go check it out at Emotive Mind Podcast. But while I was starting to see his partying lifestyle, I didn't see the psychiatrist visits, the bottles of Xanax, and other depression medications he had with him, and the extreme lows that he went through mentally, and the struggle that my parents faced trying to help save him from his mind. Him and I weren't extremely close to the point that he could open up to me about his daily anxiety and dark thoughts that he had, but I was starting to see in his eyes and his behavior that he was not okay. I would try to sit with him and see if he would open up to me so that maybe I could give him advice or simply just be there to listen and see what was on his mind. I was only 15 years old at that time and not really in a position to even remotely give advice to him on how he could better his situation because I was very young and trying to grow up and make sense of my own direction in life. But I still thought that maybe just by offering to be there for him, it would maybe help him feel comfortable enough to open up to me when he was ready or when he was really needing someone to be there for him. Once the signs of his addiction started showing up, I feel like that's when everyone stopped sugarcoating everything and they started opening up to me more about the reality of his struggles and what he was going through. There wasn't really a way for them to cover up his addiction now because I was living the reality with them by witnessing the drinking, smoking, parties, and everything he would do late at night. He was always on the go and rarely spent time with family and me when he was home, and he was very disconnected in conversations. He seemed like he was looking for a way to escape sitting there and hanging out with us to go be with his friends. When I sometimes looked into his eyes, I could see the glazed over blank distant stares, and there were a lot of moments that his bright personality and twinkle still showed in his eyes, and the drugs hadn't fully consumed him yet. During this time, I witnessed a carousel of friends that he had around him that was always changing, but I say friends lightly because in reality, they were fake and mentally unstable people that used my brother's kindness to get what they wanted. A lot of them were addicts as well, and they just wanted access to drugs, parties, girls, I don't know, whatever they wanted, they just went to him when they needed it. And they wanted to be around someone who matched their mental energy, which unfortunately my brother did. It was sad, depressed, and addicted. My brother was always there for people. He was listening, offering advice, being there if they called, and he had a deep care and love in his heart for people, but especially his family and loved ones. I mentioned in the last episode how we tend to try and save other people when we can't quite save ourselves. And my brother was a perfect example of that because he was always trying to help others and save them, but he could not save his own mind. I honestly cannot count how many times I would sit next to my brother and see him texting or calling someone to see if they could hang out. He really just wanted someone to be there for him, but they would give him fake excuses or ignore his call completely. And I would see his smile fade completely and change to a depressed, sad look when he realized no one was going to hang out with him, yet he was the first person they called when they wanted someone around. It's honestly hard to explain the feelings that I had watching that play out in front of me. Like to see someone that you love just sitting there looking so hopeless because all they wanted was someone to say, yes, let's hang out, or I'm here for you, come talk to me. And no one took the time of day until it was convenient for them. I remember feeling the tears form in my eyes, looking at the sinking feeling in his face. Not only was he there for others, he was there for me. And he always checked in on me to see if something was going on in my life that I needed to talk about or just see how I was doing. And he always told me how much he loved me and how proud he was of me. He was filled with so much love for everyone around him, but he just didn't have that love for himself. Although he tried to show everyone peace and love, the darkness was too strong and the drugs just started changing his life for the worse. I remember being woken up in the middle of the night by one of my parents saying that he was at the beach drunk and roaming around the streets alone, and we had to go pick him up because he had no way to go home. When we were on the way to pick him up, I remember feeling so frustrated that we had to get up late in the middle of the night and go pick him up to save him yet again, because this was a frequent occurrence of us having to go and save him. But obviously, there was a deep fear that what if something happened to him before we could go pick him up? Thankfully, nothing happened to him that night, but situations like these started to occur way too frequently now, and I was mentally drained. So the next morning, I went to school, all put together, hair, makeup, outfit, as if I didn't just get home a few hours earlier from having to go pick him up at the beach. No one knew what was happening daily at home or the previous night even, and you would not have been able to tell from the outside. Now, at this point, I was used to having to kind of like put up a facade in a way and keep it together on the outside because that's what my family and I did. So it taught me to do that not only then, but even to this day sometimes. After this, I was definitely starting to piece things together and see that my brother was struggling. He was filling his voids and depression with girls, drugs, fake friends, parties, and all of the stuff that was very bad for him. Now, my new normal became wondering who he was going to bring over to the house, where he was going that night, or if I was going to get a devastating phone call that something bad happened to him. The severity of his drug addiction finally hit me when one day I had looked and saw a little like silver tin on the kitchen counter. And when I opened it up, I saw a cut up straw, just a little piece of the straw. And I stood there and was frozen. There was like a blank look on my face, and I was thinking, what the hell did I just find? And is this what I think it is? But as you can imagine, yes, it is that. It was a straw that he cut up to snort coke with. My thoughts started getting very heavy because I wondered how far he went in experimenting with drugs. I wondered if he was using things like heroin or meth, but he told us that he would never go that far to do such a hard drug. But you just never know, with someone who's struggling with an addiction. I believed him when he said he wouldn't do such a hard drug, and to this day, I don't believe he ever did. But as time passed, the situations that he was involved in got scarier and harder to witness. There was one night that I was sleeping and my phone kept vibrating. It kept going off and I was like, what the heck is going on? So I look at the phone and it was one of my brother's friends. He was calling me because they needed me to open the garage door because my brother was unconscious. He couldn't walk. He was, out of it. I would say he was in and out of consciousness, but he was not coherent. He couldn't speak. He was all over the place. So I ran downstairs and opened the garage door for them, and they brought him into the garage and sat him in a chair. And my brother was honestly the worst that I've ever seen. I can't even describe how he was other than just, moving around and just looking at me like completely glazed over. Like he didn't know where he was, which he actually looked at me and asked me who I was. That was a moment that to this day is very hard to think about because he had no clue who his own sister was. And it's very heartbreaking to look and see your own brother not even know who you are. So when that happened, my brother then fell out of the chair and I was like, okay, this is the final straw. I have to go wake up my parent because he needs to go to the hospital. Like if he doesn't, he's going to probably die right here on the floor. So I asked them, what happened. And they said that all they knew was that he took a couple bars of Xanax at a party they just went to. And they didn't know what else happened because they weren't really with him the entire time. So I ran upstairs, I woke up my parent, and they ended up coming downstairs and getting him in the car and taking him to the hospital to have his stomach pumped. So he was saved that night, but he wasn't able to be saved the next time. Before this situation, I was already constantly on edge and worried that I would get a phone call like the one that I had that night, that something bad had happened to him, or even worse, that he passed away. After watching my brother almost pass away due to the drug overdose in front of me, this made my anxiety through the roof times 100. This was a daily feeling for both me and my family that, are we going to get a call that he's in jail or he's dead? This was the reality that we faced because at that point, everyone had to accept that he had a deep problem with his addiction. There is absolutely no way to mentally prepare yourself for losing someone, but at this time, I knew that it was a very big possibility if he kept going down the path he was going. He tried drug and rehab programs, but he never successfully completed them. He always left midway and was right back into the same pattern and cycles of random girls, parties, and drugs. Things got progressively worse, and I remember one evening, it was just me, my brother, and his girlfriend home, and I was in my room, chilling, relaxing, everything was calm in the house. Then I remember hearing him and his girlfriend arguing, but he sounded very, very angry and loud, which was unlike him. So I kind of peeked open the door, and I looked, and he started walking past the door, and he looked at me. And when I tell you that his eyes were literally black, like pure black, and he did not have black eyes to begin with, okay? So when I looked in his eyes, it was honestly demonic. I know that sounds crazy, but it truly was. It really shook me to the core when I saw that. And I was not looking at my brother. I was looking at somebody that I had no clue who it was. I asked him what was going on, and he looked at me with the angriest face, and he had such a bad attitude. Like, he was so angry at me for whatever reason, and he basically just told me to not worry about it, go in my room, shut the door, and just stay in there. But that's kind of hard when you hear him going crazy in the back of the house. So when I heard him and his girlfriend getting louder and louder, and specifically him, I was like, okay, I don't know if he's back there hitting her or being violent. And I do want to preface this by saying that my brother was not abusive. He was not a crazy person that would ever lay his hands on a woman. He was not a violent person, but I really thought that that's what was happening because of the sounds that I heard coming from them. He sounded so hateful and crazy. My adrenaline was pumping like crazy because I was not about to sit here and just stand by and let him hit her if that's what he was doing. So I opened the door again and I went back there to his room, and luckily he was not hitting her, and he never did. But I went back there and I was like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? And, it's just like, oh, don't worry about it. Get out of here. Da, da, da. So I'm like, okay. So I ran back to my room and I called my parent because I was like, listen, he's going crazy right now and I don't feel comfortable. Like, I feel genuinely scared, and I was never scared around him. So that's how you know something really bad was happening. So I just stayed in my room until my parent got home. And when they did, this is when things got significantly worse because my parent was very mad that my brother was sitting there acting like this and allowing me to witness this argument and him acting crazy. But this got him even more upset and caused him to flip out worse than I'd ever seen. My brother's girlfriend and I were about to head downstairs when I looked at my brother and I saw him pick up a bar stool, okay, like a huge bar stool, and he literally picked it up and threw it across the room at my parent. Now, luckily, it missed them and they were not hurt, but once again, I cannot even begin to describe the fear that ran through my body and how upsetting it was to see my brother pick up a bar stool and try to throw it and hurt one of our parents. Like, that to me was insane. Keep in mind, the entire time that I'm watching this play out and my brother throw the bar stool, his eyes were still fully black, which added to the fear level times 1,000. Okay. That was very scary. I felt like I was in a scary movie, but it was my life. And after that happened, I had to make the tough decision to call the cops on my brother because I was afraid that he was going to try to physically harm my parent or me and his girlfriend. So I called the cops, and my parent had told me, just go outside, stay out there, and don't come in. But I was like, I could not live with myself if I stayed outside and didn't watch to make sure nothing happened to them. So I kind of stayed by the stairs and the front door until the cops showed up. Finally, the cops got there and brought him outside and de-escalated the situation. But do you know how hard it is to have to call the cops on your own brother and being so terrified that he could actually cause physical harm to you or your parent? You know, it was the drugs that was making him do that. But to have him sit there and look at me with tears in his eyes and tell me, why did you call the cops? Why did you bring them here? Why would you do this? Why would you call them on me? Like, it was completely heartbreaking because, of course, I would never, ever want to have to do that. But I was very scared, and I was like, he has to get help. And if that's him going to go sit in jail for the night or whatever to help detox, then it is what it is. My brother would never, ever willingly put us in harm's way when he was sober. He was a natural protector and loved us more than anything. So I knew it was the drugs that made him flip out that night, which he ended up telling me as well after the situation happened. But I know that he felt extremely sorry and depressed for that night. So, of course, I forgave him, but the sadness has stayed with me to this day, thinking of how that night unfolded. From what I saw my brother go through in his addiction, it made him do crazy things that he would never ever do sober. It clouded his mind and judgment, but deep down inside was the true, genuine version of himself, just trying to claw his way out of this and be saved. Leading up to the year of his passing, I really started noticing how his bright personality was fading and he was starting to lose his spark. His demeanor changed, and any twinkle left in his eye was replaced with sadness and desperation. You could physically see the hope draining out of him, but he still tried his hardest to attempt to complete rehab programs, move around to different places, and see if that helped his mind and to gain some independence. He tried to distance himself from certain bad people in his life. I think for a short time earlier in the year that he passed away, he was starting to see a semi-brighter future for himself, but ultimately the addiction was too strong and God was going to call him home a few months later. This is a very heavy part of my life to talk about, so I'm going to take a second and light my Kello Collective Cotton Sheets candle. You can shop this candle on kellocollective.com, and this candle is a clean blend of cotton blossom, sandalwood, violet, and a hint of lemon. It smells just like freshly cleaned cotton sheets. All right, now that I've freshened up the air, let's go ahead and get into an even more difficult half of this episode. And another trigger warning, if you have a hard time talking about death or addiction, go ahead and skip past this part and go right to the end or check out another episode. There were multiple chances that my brother was given to try and turn his life around, but especially the year that he passed away. He was given a major opportunity to move to a different state, get a new job, and be separated from the drug and party lifestyle he was in. He would have been able to turn his life around by pursuing this opportunity and get clean and truly begin living his life, because up until this point, he honestly wasn't living. He was just surviving. But I remember sitting with him talking at the kitchen table about this opportunity, and I had so much desperation in my eyes when he talked about the pros and cons of going to another state. And he was very hesitant, but I could see how he was very heavily considering this because I think that he saw how this could bring him a new lease on life and help him break the chains he had to his addiction. I attempted multiple times to express how amazing this opportunity would be for him and how nice it would be to get out of the depressing state that we had currently lived in and do something different. But at the end of the day, he was grown enough to make his own decisions and no one could force him to go. Of course, it was sad to think about him moving away, but at this point, I could see and feel the stress that my family and I were going through trying to figure out how to save him. But most importantly, we just didn't want to have to bury him. We wanted to save him before it was too late. Ultimately, after my brother took some time to think about it, he decided to not continue with the opportunity to move and instead stay home, stuck in these same cycles and patterns. Someone very close to me once told me, "You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink." So essentially what this means is that you can lead someone to something, potentially even a life-changing opportunity, but if they aren't the ones drinking the water, like a horse drinking the water, then they're not going to do it, or they're not going to take the actions to change their life. And this was 100% my brother at this time. Figuratively, my brother had the water in his hands. It was right there, ready to drink, but he decided to skip past that water and keep looking for the water that was going to help save him, but he wasn't ever going to find it. Over the course of the next few months, my brother tried changing his life by moving an hour away with someone he knew, but this person was also an addict and a heroin addict at that, so even worse. And as you can imagine, having two addicts in one house is going to end up in a disaster. I didn't see him that much after he moved, obviously, so I was mainly focusing on getting ready for my senior year and getting ready to graduate the next year, go to college, and do all those fun things. But things were much calmer and slower at my house while he was away. To be honest, I was very thankful for that because, of course, it's sad to not have your sibling close, but there was always so much stress and anxiety when he was around because we were afraid that something bad was going to happen. So it was nice to have a little bit of rest for me and my family. After a few months of him moving away, my family and I got together to celebrate his 21st birthday, and I was very excited to see him and take a little trip to have fun, but little did I know that was going to be the last birthday that we would celebrate with him. During that trip, he seemed to be having a good time, but, deep down when something isn't right, you can tell. And I've always been very observant and good with reading people. So, as much as he tried to make things seem like he was okay, his life was better now, and, he was glad to be out of the city that we're from, I wanted that to be so true, but I could tell he was just putting up a front. And my brother did not want us to worry about him. So, as many times as he would look at me in my eyes and say he's doing better, I could see the truth in his eyes and face and demeanor. A couple months after we celebrated his birthday, I started my senior year of high school and my brother moved back home. I could see at this point that he was extremely depressed and he couldn't even hide it. He had very few friends, and the ones that he did have were extremely fake and only using him for drugs or whatever else they wanted. He tried working a couple of random jobs, but it was not enough to keep him stable. He really didn't have any plans for the future, and he wasn't really focusing on his music anymore, which was something that he really enjoyed doing. The only thing that he ever did consistently was draw and create art. Now looking back, I see that that was most likely an outlet for him to express what was on his mind and how he was feeling without having to say it. We celebrated our last Thanksgiving with him and we're getting ready for Christmas. Things were normal, but still sad and stressful because we were worried about getting a phone call that he was dead. and he didn't really go to parties anymore. Instead, he mainly went out with friends or to go hang out at their houses, which is where he was the night that he passed away. While I'm not going to go into the specific details of what happened when he passed away, I will say that a very big piece in it was the people that he was around. And instead of saving my brother when he showed the signs that something was very, very wrong, they were too scared to get in trouble for doing drugs and whatever else they were doing at home, that they prolonged the time to call 911 and get help because of their own selfish needs. I do want to mention that if you are in a situation, God forbid, that someone you're around is doing drugs or is about to overdose or shows the signs of an overdose, please don't hesitate to call 911. And even if you are the one involved in doing the drugs, it's not worth it to not call and get help, because the person that you're with is someone's brother, sister, son, daughter, cousin, etc. That's someone's loved one, and they deserve to be saved too. But I remember being woken up by my parent in the middle of the night saying that they had received a call that he was unconscious and being rushed to the hospital. I offered to go with them to the hospital, but they told me just to stay home and get some rest and that they would let me know what was happening. So then they left. But I remember having such a sinking feeling in my gut that something bad was happening. And I was so restless, I couldn't sleep, as you could imagine. And honestly, I thought that maybe this was going to be like the last time when his friends called me when he was coming to the garage. And I thought that, he was just going to get his stomach pumped and everything was going to be okay like last time. But this didn't turn out like the first time. Hours later, my parent came home and sat on the edge of my bed to wake me up. But as soon as I opened my eyes and looked at their face, I could see the tears coming down, and I knew that something was very bad. And I remember all I could do is sit up and look at them and just say, no, 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 like this can't be it. This can't be happening. I just started bawling my eyes out because the terrifying reality hit me that our worst fear just came true. And my parent told me that he was on life support and the doctors didn't really have hope that he was going to make it, but he wasn't quite gone yet. There was minimal brain activity still happening, and they said that if there even was a way to save him, he would live his life as a vegetable and have no quality of life, and he wouldn't function properly. Once my family and I met up at the hospital, we sat there for hours trying to comprehend what was even happening and if we really were about to lose him. But the doctors eventually ended up coming up to us and told us that there was nothing they could do. They were not able to save him, and they had to take him off life support. So we said our final goodbyes to him, and they pulled the plug. The pain is honestly indescribable to sit here and watch someone who was so once full of life and was so young. He was only 21 years old and had a whole life ahead of him. But to watch that be ripped away and to see him laying there on his deathbed all because of powder and some pills. It doesn't make sense why God takes away the people that we love. And as much as we try to find a reason, there will truly never be a way to justify and figure out why they aren't here anymore. Why we can't just pick up the phone and call them to see how they're doing. Why, he isn't here celebrating birthdays and holidays with us. Why we have an empty seat at family get-togethers and a whole world of other things that we have to do without him now. One thing that truly sticks with me to this day is a year before he passed away at my 16th birthday party, he did a freestyle rap for me, as he loved to do. And in that, he talked about how much he loved me and my family and how he was going to forever be my guardian angel. Well, a year and a half later, he was and is now my guardian angel. After he passed away, I tried from day one to try and be as strong as I could for myself and my family. To be honest, I actually saw a significant amount of strength in myself that I didn't know was there, but I really just tried to jump in and help my family and be there for them. But I think it kind of slowed down my own grieving process because I was so busy at trying to make sure everyone else was okay, but I didn't really check to make sure I was okay. So 6 months after he passed away, I graduated high school, but his absence really hit me harder at that point because I remember how he used to tell me how excited he was to watch me walk across that stage and how he was going to be out there in the audience cheering for me, clapping, and, telling everybody, like, that's my sister, look at her. I was excited about that because I was going to have my family together and have them celebrating a very big accomplishment with me. But now he was gone. And when I walked across that stage to get my diploma, I looked into the crowd at my family and saw them cheering and clapping for me. But all I could imagine was him standing right there and, clapping, cheering, and getting all excited to see me walk across the stage. I wanted nothing more in that moment than to see my brother standing right there next to my family, yelling embarrassingly loud for me, to see him excited that that was his sister up there getting her diploma. It meant the world to me, of course, to have my family there, and I felt very, very, very blessed. But the heartbreak of having an empty seat next to my family was very heavy on my heart. And I had to stop myself from crying after I walked across the stage, but I kept it together until I got home that night. I didn't realize the grief that I had from his passing until I had my own anxiety journey that started years later. I went through the typical stages of grief, but it wasn't until I had actually started to sit down and see in myself that I was not healed from this. I, as a matter of fact, did not have a lot of closure or peace from this, and everything clicked for me to start to heal. The thing with losing someone that you love is that I don't believe you fully heal from their passing completely, but you can create acceptance, closure, and find peace over knowing they're in a better place. Whether or not you're religious, I do believe that that person goes to a better place. And after my brother passed away, I had very, very big signs and communication from him. I know it sounds crazy, but we'll talk about this in the next episode. But I had a lot of signs from him that he was with God and everything was okay and he was finally at peace. Besides prayer and therapy and self-reflection and taking the time to really think about, how I felt about his passing, the angel numbers and the signs that I received are truly what helped me heal from his passing significantly more. Join me here next Tuesday as we talk more about grief, angel numbers, and the spirituality side of things. And we will talk more about healing after losing someone from an addiction or just someone that was close to you from any other cause. Healing is not a linear process and it's not easy by any means, but it's not impossible to find closure and truly find acceptance in this. You got this, I promise, and we will talk about this together. Thank you guys so very much for listening to the end of this podcast episode. I truly hope that you enjoyed it, and make sure to check out any previous A Motive Mind podcast episodes that you may have missed before this one. And if you would like to check out the video recordings of this episode and every other A Motive Mind podcast episode, make sure to head on over to YouTube at A Motive Mind Podcast to watch the recordings. And while you're there on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe and turn on your post notifications so that you don't miss the new episodes that drop every Tuesday on YouTube and Spotify. You can also get social with me on the A Motive Mind podcast on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify at A Motive Mind Podcast. And I would love for you to check out and support the podcast through my small business, Kello Collective, hand-poured coconut soy candles and products on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. And you can shop the candles on kellocollective.com. Well, that's all for today. I will see you guys here next Tuesday, where together we will create a motive mind. See you on the next episode. Bye.